What would you give up for love? Your crown, your country, your legacy? King Edward VIII faced that exact choice. When he fell for a twice-divorced American woman, Wallis Simpson, everything was on the line. Behind palace walls, their romance sparked a royal crisis. One that shattered tradition and, in the chaos, quietly cleared the path for a young girl named Elizabeth. Before she was queen, someone else's sacrifice changed her destiny forever. Was it passion or recklessness? Devotion or disaster? This is Crown Buzz Channel. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for notifications. Let's begin. Even before becoming king, Edward was no ordinary royal. Charismatic, charming, and wildly popular, he was Britain's golden prince, but also its most unpredictable. He loved the spotlight, partied with celebrities, and openly criticized outdated traditions. Many hoped he would modernize the monarchy. But behind closed doors, Edward was restless. Known for his string of affairs, he wasn't interested in the usual royal match. While other royals married for alliances, Edward wanted something far more dangerous: love on his own terms. In 1931, at a weekend gathering hosted by Lady Furness, who happened to be Edward's then lover, the Prince of Wales was introduced to a woman unlike anyone else. Her name was Wallis Simpson, a sharp-tongued American with a past the British elite found impossible to ignore. She was not of noble blood. She wasn't even single. At the time, she was married to her second husband, Ernest Simpson, a British-American shipping executive. But Wallis had a presence that couldn't be overlooked: confident, worldly, and entirely unapologetic. Their initial conversations were witty and charged. Wallis didn't bow or flatter like most of the women in Edward's social circle. She challenged him, and he, bored of the royal formality and craving real connection, found that irresistible. Over the next few years, their friendship deepened. She was often seen at his side, at dinner parties, weekend retreats, and country outings. Behind the scenes, their relationship moved from platonic to something far more intimate. By 1934, Wallis was practically living at Fort Belvedere, Edward's countryside residence. They traveled together, holidays in Europe, quiet getaways that were anything but subtle. The British press, constrained by strict codes and royal pressure, kept the public in the dark. But among politicians, aristocrats, and palace insiders, the romance was an open secret and a growing concern. Then, in January 1936, Edward's father, King George V, passed away. Edward took the throne, and his forbidden relationship with Wallis was no longer just a whispered scandal. It was about to rock the monarchy. When Edward announced his intention to marry Wallis Simpson, Britain didn't just raise eyebrows, it was thrown into full-blown crisis. The Church of England, which he now headed as king, held firm. Marriage to a twice-divorced woman with two living ex-husbands simply could not be allowed. Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin delivered the harsh truth. The government would not support the match. Parliament stood with him, and the British Empire, already uneasy, now faced a storm. For the public, the reaction was split down the middle. Traditionalists were scandalized. Wallis was American, divorced, and deemed morally unfit to be queen. But quietly, others admired Edward's boldness. A monarch willing to give up everything for love? That stirred hearts, even as it shattered royal expectations. Edward's advisors pleaded for alternatives. Couldn't he delay the marriage? Perhaps keep Wallis as a mistress? But Edward, headstrong and deeply in love, wouldn't settle. The crown meant power. Wallis meant purpose, and he couldn't have both. In his own words, "I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king without the help and support of the woman I love." It wasn't just personal. The decision threatened the very stability of the monarchy. Some believed he could have stood his ground, forced Parliament's hand, but doing so risked constitutional chaos, even civil unrest. And with Europe on the brink of war, Britain could not afford a fractured throne. Still, Edward was resolute. Love for him wasn't a scandal. It was non-negotiable. On December 10, 1936, less than a year into his reign, Edward VIII signed the Abdication Papers. It marked the first voluntary abdication in British history, a seismic event that sent shockwaves through the empire. The following evening, Edward addressed the nation in a live radio broadcast. His voice, heavy with emotion, cracked at moments as he spoke from Windsor Castle, no longer as king, but as a man who had chosen love over a crown. "I now quit altogether public affairs," he said, "and I lay down my burden." It was raw, honest, and unlike anything the public had heard from a royal. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered in solemn silence. Some wept openly. Others simply stood still, stunned by the enormity of what had happened. Newspapers the next morning captured the mood with headlines like "The King Who Gave Up Everything" and "A Love That Shook the Empire." The monarchy didn't have time to pause. Edward's younger brother, the reluctant Prince Albert, was thrust onto the throne as King George VI. Shy and plagued by a speech impediment, he was never groomed for kingship, yet overnight he became the man tasked with holding the royal institution together. In the space of 24 hours, Britain had lost a king to love and gained one who would have to face the storm of a coming world war. The crown endured, but not without scars. Edward became the Duke of Windsor and left England for good. Wallis joined him soon after, and in 1937, the two married in a small chateau in France. No member of the royal family attended. They were stylish, wealthy, and well-traveled, but never fully accepted. Wallis was never granted the title Her Royal Highness, a snub that reportedly haunted Edward for years. Though they hosted glittering parties and rubbed shoulders with the elite, their lives were marked by a quiet bitterness. The glamour couldn't erase what they'd lost. Letters from Edward suggest he struggled with isolation and regret, writing, "I sacrificed everything for her, yet we are not truly free." And then came the most damaging rumor of all. In 1937, they visited Germany and met Adolf Hitler. The press called it a diplomatic disaster. Later, documents revealed the Nazis hoped to reinstall Edward as a puppet monarch if they invaded Britain. The couple was quietly exiled further, to the Bahamas, where Edward served as governor during the war. Did they know what they were getting into? Or had their fairy tale turned into a gilded cage? Edward and Wallis stayed together until his death in 1972. Wallis passed away in 1986. They are buried side by side in Windsor, far from the world they once ruled. But their story echoes to this day. Had Edward remained king and fathered heirs, everything would have been different. The crown would have stayed in his direct line. And Elizabeth? She likely would have lived a quiet life as a royal niece, not the longest reigning monarch in British history. But Edward's decision to give it all up for Wallis handed the throne to his brother, George VI. And when he passed, it was Elizabeth who stepped in, forever reshaping the monarchy. One man's choice for love didn't just cause a crisis. It changed Britain's future. Their love story paved the way for future royals to marry for love, but it came at a staggering cost. Some say Edward was a hopeless romantic. Others say he was reckless, selfish, even dangerous. So what do you think? Was Edward a fool in love? Or a man brave enough to follow his heart, no matter the price? Would you walk away from a kingdom for the person you love? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more royal twists from Crown Buzz. We'll see you in the next video.